Yo, what's up? It's Jimmy from Glitchy Thumbs. Today we have character 2.5, which is the last character in character set number 2. We're actually getting the ball rolling and plowing through all these characters. Let me know what you think if you've been watching all my videos. Let me know what you think of all the characters in character set 1 and also character set number 2. Let me know if you like any of them. They're all abstract. They're all a little weird. Some of them are creepy. Some of them are not. Some of them are pretty cool. For character 2.5, this is the introduction of a more humanoid body, which is the first time I've actually done it in Blender. So we get to see that process on how it affects my workflow. Please like and subscribe. I haven't looked at the analytics, but if you get a chance and you haven't done it already, please do so. It helps out this channel, helps me out. I appreciate your help. Let's get to the video. After finishing character 2.4, the salamander, I just unhide it, turn on my shortcut add-on so that you can see all my mouse clicks. Since I've been using the action editor a lot for my animation, I didn't create a tab for this yet, for this screen. I always have to join the two sides together. If you don't want to do this, you need to create a new view for different purposes, similar to how Blender has it at the top for like layout, modeling, sculpting, UV editing. You'll need to create a view for your animations. I do so in the future videos, so I'll explain that when I get to that portion. That's just a heads up in case you want to get a head start on your characters and want to set everything up in Blender so that you don't have to worry about this. You turn on my reference. I have two different ones, one for characters facing the left side and then one for the characters facing the right side. It's just a flipped version of the reference. I do this because my sketches aren't all facing left to right. That's just an easier way for me to switch between the references because I'm lazy. That's just a faster way to do it. I click this cursor to unlock the reference. That way I can move the reference in place so that we can start blocking out character 2.5. This is just how I chose to do it since all my characters are in this one reference. We definitely want the reference to be a bit more aligned because it's going to be easier to create our 3D shape if everything is symmetric. That's up to you. If you can visualize it and create the 3D model without having to straighten everything out, you can definitely do so. I definitely do so here. I thought I straightened it out, but I guess I didn't. I start with a plane for character 2.5. This is just the head that we're working on at the moment. I'm going to be doing the humanoid body later on. Be sure to watch that section if you're curious to know how I did that. I scaled the plane down, move it into place, go into edit mode, extrude to the right, select the left vertices, extrude to the left. Pretty much just eyeballing everything and going towards the furthest right side of the reference and also the furthest left side of the reference. I make a loop cut so that we have even edges across the columns. Select the top vertices, extrude to the top of the sketch. You can kind of visualize it now, what I'm doing. I'm just getting the plane to hit all of the sides of character 2.5's head. I make multiple loop cuts in the middle to give us even edge loops that we can pull out later on, since that's what we need to do to create our 3D shape. Now we just need to get rid of the dead space around the reference by deleting the unnecessary faces that we don't need. You can always make more loop cuts at any time. I start to align the outside edges in so we can get this round shape for the head. Character 2.5 kind of looks like an ant in a way, some sort of abstract ant, if you can visualize that. He's definitely some sort of insect because of the antennas and his eyes. I think that's what I was visualizing at the time I sketched this out. Let me know if he looks like an ant or not. Or maybe a bee. Looks like some insect. Some sort of bug. Let's just put it that way. Just get your vertices as close as possible. This is going to be an odd shape. It's not round because of my sketch. But that's okay. Shapes can be odd. This is all for practice purposes. I do work on better circular shapes on my current characters because I have a better process for that now. Since this was the plane method, I had to follow the sketch a little bit, making sure my plane is wrapped nicely around. You can see I'm adjusting the vertices to get it more rounded. It doesn't have to follow the reference 100%. I just go with flow most of the time. So far that I look at it, it looks pretty good actually. It's pretty close to a round shape. Some odd areas that can be fixed. It's a little lopsided, but it works regardless. If you need more outside vertices, you can create a loop cut. That will help you create a more rounded shape. If it bothers you that your shapes aren't round. Sometimes it bothers me, sometimes it doesn't. It really depends on the character that I'm working on. Like if I want it to be really precise, something I want to not have to go back and revise too much, then I'll consider making sure the shape is more refined early on. Otherwise, I'm going to have to go back and redo the character. That's just extra work. But then again, it's actually cool to see your improvement on how you would create a second version of your character the next time around. Your workflow and your process is always going to change. You're always going to find a better solution to how you've done things in the past. I definitely changed my process. I don't really use the plane method anymore. I actually use the cube and the subdivision surface modifier much more, because you can get more of a rounder shape for all your characters in a faster and more efficient way. Also, I don't need to flip the normals anymore in the face orientation, so that eliminates that time. That's what my new process is, and hopefully I get to those videos so you guys can actually see that. That's the beauty of recording everything that you do, because you can actually see how much you're improving and whether or not you're just repeating steps over and over and not really finding a better solution every time. If a process takes like 2 hours and you have a way to do it in 1 hour, wouldn't you do it? And the only way you know that is if you actually record your entire process for each character and see what's taking a long time and how you can actually eliminate that from your process. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes you have to just go through it and just plow through, put on some music, don't even worry about it, be in your flow state, which is what I'm normally in. I have my music on and I'm just going through all the different steps that I need to do to create these characters. Before lunch comes around, I'm already finished with a lot of the processes. And I try to go through the entire process of blocking out UV unwrap, texture paint, rigging with Rigify, and animation as quick as possible, just to see how fast I can do it. Just start creating that muscle memory for yourself, and then everything just gets easier and easier over time, if that makes sense. This happens with pretty much anything that you do. The first time around, it's always going to take a very long time. Your brain is trying to process all the information that you're learning, and it's a little bit too much at first. But as you do it daily and practice, slowly your brain starts to figure out the ins and outs of how to make this much faster. Things start to become a little bit easier. At least it is for me. I don't feel like I'm using a lot of mental energy actually on all these characters like I did in the beginning. This is also applying towards recording and narrating all these videos. I feel like I've been practicing so much that now it starts to feel like second nature to me, where I'm just in my flow, which is how I feel now about narrating these videos. It wasn't easy to get to this point where I'm just talking like how I would regularly talk in a conversation, but it actually took me some time, and you can actually see the progress if you've been watching the videos from character 1.1, which is Ghost. Ghost was very hard to make, because I just said, hey, let's just record the entire process and then record the voiceover and just combined it for both Blender and Build Blocks. And that was going to be my project that I'm going to be working on for all of my characters. But I needed to go through that process with character 1.1, Ghost first. That was the hardest thing to do. I haven't done much with game development. I haven't made any games. I had to go through physical therapy actually for my right wrist. I actually broke it in a bike accident. That's why I haven't really posted anything. That's pretty much the story on why I've been gone for so long. But now it's actually part of this video while we're blocking out the character. So it took a very long time to get to this point, but now it feels a little bit more natural for me to be doing these videos. I'm glad I got to this point. I just plowed through all these characters so far, and then all these videos, and then all these voiceovers, and then I also have to edit. All that stuff takes time, energy, and attention. I'm glad I got to this point, because I'm trying to make some pretty cool characters at the end of the day and then build the game mechanic. I really want to get to my next big game that I want to work on. These characters are actually leading the way. I'm glad I'm making these videos. Hope you guys are enjoying it. Each character is going to be a very important milestone for my progress. Now I have everything documented to showcase what it takes to make mobile games. At least my process on making mobile games. My process is going to be a little bit different from everyone else's. This just applies to me. Not everyone goes through this type of process. They might do things a little bit different, but there's definitely something you can learn from my own process. Hopefully you can grab a few things or two and apply it to your own, but this is just how I do things, and I'm just going to continually improve and improve until I can actually shorten down the amount of time that I spent on this. Eventually, I'll be able to create more complex characters, which is what I want to get to. My sketches in the later character sets, they are definitely more defined, more detailed. I definitely have to work my way up to that skill set level, and hopefully I can actually create all of them where they're actually pretty cool and fun to play with. I saw a video where someone was making little action figures out of resin, out of their 3D art or of other people's 3D art. I think it was like they were making 3D printed versions of their characters. I thought that was pretty cool. I want to get to that point because that would be pretty cool to create some 3D printed versions of my character and then get to that point where I'm just painting them in real life. That'd be pretty cool. Just set them up on my table. That would be some sort of milestone that hopefully I'll get to. All right, back to blocking out character 2.5, the mean ant. That's what he looks like, mean ant. I like that. I dissolve that edge loop. I'm organizing the left vertices to create more of a straight line for the left side. I didn't like how that edge looked because this is going to help out with pulling out the character later on. You got to make sure your edges are straightened out. The left side is a little bit curved, but that's okay to keep it that way. I'm grabbing these bottom vertices so we can create that nose area for the mean ant. Extrude those vertices and do multiple loop cuts towards the middle and then align the vertices around the outside to the sketch. That seems to be my improved part of this plane method. That's something I wasn't doing before. I was actually aligning things, I believe, while extruding, which was taking a lot of time. It was easier to just extrude everything at once first and then make loop cuts and then align all the vertices around the reference. Then you're actually just doing everything in steps. So you know exactly when to extrude, you know exactly when to loop cut, and loop cuts can actually be at any time, and then aligning the vertices can be all in one part of the step. That's what I'm seeing so far with the process in this video. I don't know if you guys see that, but that's what I'm observing of my own workflow process. Again, I don't use the plane method for some of the future characters anymore. I definitely skip a lot of this, having to pull out the character, because that actually takes a lot of time. Doing it with the cube and the subdivision surface modifier actually eliminates the process of pulling out the edges to create the curvature of the 3D model. This is how I started in my Blender journey, and this was the easiest way for me to do it. Extrude in the y-axis to get half of the width of the head for character 2.5, the mean ant. That's actually a good name. I might go back to this character and build the game for that. Delete these back faces because we don't need that. For the middle of the character, apply all transforms, do a quick origin, add a mirror modifier, go into edit mode, select all the faces, drag them as close as possible. Go into X-ray mode, select the middle vertices, drag them together so that they connect. Make sure clipping is on in order for them to connect correctly. That's going to be the flattened shape of character 2.5's head. Now we need to add some curvature to create more of the 3D shape. Now I want to create the antenna by grabbing this face at the top and doing an inset. While you're doing an inset, there's options at the top for clicking O for outset, B for boundary, and I for individual. I forget which one I actually click because it doesn't show at the bottom for my hotkeys, but it changes the shape of your inset so that it's actually insetting in the middle. We have a mirror of our object. We actually want to have a face that pulls out in the middle of the character to create the antenna. Otherwise, if we kept the original inset, we'll end up with two antennas, one on the front side and then another antenna on the back side. You can see the inset lets me extrude out our shape so that I can create the antenna specifically from that face that's being selected. I think I'm trying to figure out how to make a slimmer antenna, but I don't think you can do so unless you're adjusting the vertices, which is what I would have done now. I guess that's what I'm doing in the video. I move these vertices to the right. That way we have a more smaller width on our antenna. I'm not sure what I'm doing here, but I do a loop cut on the right side and I get rid of that extra edge at the top. I guess I decide not to pull out the antenna. I thought that was when I pulled it out, but you guys get the point of the inset. You can create an inset within your face and then be able to pull out that area at any time to create more polygons. That's what you would normally do for your 3D shapes anyways. It could get confusing if you're not familiar with the 3D space. That's why I always start with a flat plane, because then you're only dragging things in the X and Y axis. But then when you introduce a third dimension, you're actually pulling things out in other directions. So that might be confusing for people trying to dissolve this vertice. But if you do that, it actually distorts our faces. If you don't want that vertice, you have to dissolve the entire edge. That keeps it intact. Otherwise, you'll have a distorted face. I guess I'm looking around the 3D model to see what edges I can remove. Sometimes you don't really need some of the edges on the final 3D object because it's just an extra one during your blocking out of the character. I grab the left edge loop and do an edge slide because we're trying to create that curvature for the sides, the character's head. This is the head of our character. I grab the edge loop on the right side and do an edge slide. This is creating the curvature around the outside of the character. Sometimes some of these vertices are going to pull back and create some weird faces. So you have to adjust these single vertices on its own to either revert them back to their original position or cut into the shape and create new vertices so that you can keep the front area flat, but around the character, you have the curvature. That normally happens around the 3D model. You can keep this if it doesn't bother you. It definitely looks off for a lot of people. You can see I'm selecting specific edges before I do an edge slide. In order to do an edge slide, you got to pull down specific edges only because some of the edges are already pulled down for some of the sides. You have to kind of eyeball, like the far edge on the right. I didn't need to select that. I only needed to select the 4 edges. Otherwise, you'll get that indent on the right side. You can always manually go in and fix each vertice again. This part takes some time, takes some practice. You don't have to get it right the first time around. I definitely don't get it right for this character. His head's already lopsided. The shape's already a little bit weird. We're actually looking at the top of his head, if you guys don't realize that. I actually rotate it later on to actually get the front side in the correct way that I added on top of our humanoid body. This video is definitely going to be a longer one, so bear with me as I'm trying to narrate this. Hopefully I didn't run into too many issues during this video. It looks like I did. I remember the head being very, what's the word? Can't think of the word. It's not symmetric, that's for sure. I could have did a better job, but that's okay. I can always go in and remodel this character again. We can compare and contrast the 2 different methods that I used and then see which one was a better one. I definitely shade smooth anyways later on, I think. The model comes out fine regardless. You don't have to do the edge slide if you don't want to. I mean, I just think it looks better having the curvature around the outside too to create a better 3D shape. This is what I mean with some of the vertices. They might not be positioned in an area that you like. You can always adjust each one as you see fit. You can do an edge slide on all those vertices as well. You have full control of what you do with your 3D models on where each vertice is placed. It all depends what you visualize for your 3D models. You might want it to be super precise to get it really curved, but some of you might not really care. It just really depends on how much time you want to spend on your characters. I think it's good to practice as much as you can if you want to be making your own 3D models. This indent on the right side definitely was bothering me. I didn't like how the shape was on this side. So I'm trying to subdivide and create new vertices so I can knife from this vertices to the other side. This is how I kind of create my own edge loops. In order to keep everything aligned, you can see we needed extra vertices to get that shape. We can get rid of this crevice by slowly moving each vertex in place. Sometimes around the character, if you leave these vertices like this actually creates a cool effect if you're using a different shading for your characters later on in texture paint. If you want some sort of like zigzag style for the outer parts of your character, you can definitely leave it like that. You can have a hybrid 3D model with pixel art. I've actually seen some pretty cool 3D models where people did pixel art on them. I've tried to do it in the past for my beginning characters. I have those videos. If you guys want to see that, let me know in the comments. Maybe I'll put them out. I tried to do some pixel art on my 3D models. It didn't turn out good because it's a very confusing process. I have to look at both sides on Blender, and on my second monitor, I'm using Sprite to texture paint everything. So it's like a little bit confusing, but it turned out okay. But I wouldn't do that for the long run because that's just a lot of work just to create one character. Pixel art takes a very long time for me. I feel like I'm using a lot of mental energy when I do pixel art. And it pretty much just makes it hard to finish characters, at least for me. Some people are like just a natural at it. I definitely need like references. Shading is really hard for pixel art. Trying to get like cool effects with the little amount of space that you have. A lot of this is just going to be very tedious if you're trying to perfect the shaping around your 3D model like I'm doing here. I'm trying my best to get everything rounded as much as possible, but also keep the front area as round as possible. This is why it's important to have your reference symmetric and aligned from the beginning, which was what I was doing. I don't know why I reverted back to the reference being the same. Now we have this lopsided shape of our character. I can't really mirror the left side or the right side to each other unless it was actually symmetric. That would make our lives so much easier because then I would only have to work on one side and then we would actually be finished by now. But now I have to work on both sides. That's what happens when you're in a creative flow. During this video, I was probably in a creative flow. I was just manually doing everything because that's what my mind was fixated on during that time. When you're fixated on something, you don't really notice what you're actually doing. You're just doing the task until it's finished. Like how I'm recording these videos now. Most of this, I have no idea what I'm talking about. I'm just looking at what's on the screen and explaining what I'm doing at the time. This is my content, so I kind of remember what I did, but I kind of don't. But then the goal for this video is actually to narrate the entire thing and finish as quick as possible. I try my best to explain everything as thoroughly as possible, but also I'm trying to skip the areas that don't need too much of explaining. And a lot of this is going to be time-lapsed, so we're not really spending too much time on specific portions. Otherwise, I'd have hours and hours of video, which is going to waste a lot of time. I try to get through things as quick as possible so you guys understand what I'm doing for each character and the new things that I learned along the way. Hopefully that helps you guys skip all of that so you don't have to go through what I went through. Now I finished with all the edge slides around the sides of character 2.5, the mean ant's head. Now we can pull out the edge loops to create our more circular shape, starting from the left column and pulling out all the way to the right. My eye is itchy right now. I'm trying not to scratch it, but it's sort of bugging me. Get it? Bugging me? All right, I'll stop. Let's see. We're almost done with the blocking out portion. Bear with me. My mouse is lagging right now. All right, we pull out the edge loops all the way to the right. This is all going to be manually. You got to pull it out based on how thick you want the character to be. If you're doing it this way, you have to pull out each edge loop one by one. It doesn't really work if you grab all of them because then it'll still be flat. We don't want it to be flat. We want it to be curved because that's what our 3D shape should look like. More rounded and not super flat, unless that's the style you're going after, like a Minecraft style where everything is cubed and flat. But for all my characters, I want it to be somewhat curved and circular. You can see it still looks super flat because, like I mentioned before, you don't have to grab all the edges, especially the edges around the outside. You want to grab the edges inside of your 3D model. That's the area that's pretty much going to be rounded. It's a tricky thing to figure out, of course, but with enough practice, you'll definitely get better at it. I sort of do, I sort of don't. The plane method, of course, is the tricky part. But later on, the cube with the subdivision surface modifier definitely helps out creating a better 3D model. If you want better 3D shapes, definitely try that out. Hopefully I get to those videos ASAP so we can see that process. I'm trying to improve that process actually. I do want to get into sculpting, but sculpting is just additional work and I'm not trying to create a perfect sculpt of my characters. I just need the shape of the 3D model to be identical to the character, and that's about it. I don't need it to be super precise, where it has like a bunch of polygons, triangles, and a million faces. I don't really need it to be that precise. I'm gonna skip the rest of pulling out the edges. This will be like a time lapse so that you guys don't have to spend too much time watching this. Hopefully I don't skip anything important. This is what I mean with the vertices. Try not to have your vertices misaligned like this. This makes your UV unwrapped unorganized. It also makes it weird for marking your seams, because then you have to select specific edges to create the shape you need to cut out. That's why it's important to align everything as best as you can so that you know where to mark your seams later on. You guys can just practice and get better at this process. This 3D model looks horrendous. It's definitely not symmetric if you look at it from the left side comparison to the right side. The width of the right side is way bigger than the left side. I remember this character being all lopsided and weird like this. I was actually practicing on how I would create the head of this character. I've actually never created a character like this, where I'm going to create the head and then also the humanoid body separately. I really didn't have no idea how to do it going into this, but it's cool. You get to see my imperfect 3D model, and that showcases that you don't have to be some sort of professional 3D modeler to create 3D models. Just like me, I'm experimental. This doesn't really look good, but then the final result actually turns out pretty well. It gets the idea across, and that's all that really matters. I just think it's cool to record everything that you do, and then you get to see how bad your experiments or your first beginning projects were, and then just get it out the way. Post it online. Who cares what people say? Like, I'm probably gonna post this, and then everyone's gonna probably make some memes, throw some shade at it because of the way it looks. But that's cool. That's all part of the process. I actually want to hear the different jokes and comments about that, because I find it funny. Like, if you're making fun of a character, that's on you. Like, I just think this entire process is supposed to be fun and experimental, and whatever comes out of it, comes out of it. That's the cool part about this entire process, because I really don't know how everything's going to turn out. I'm just going with the flow, and this is what I'm making. I guess I'm finished with the head, even though it's lopsided like that. I add the eyes with the UV sphere. We don't need to follow the reference too much. That's going to make our lives harder. Just use the UV sphere for the eyes. It's already circular. We just need to rotate it to the side so that we can get the eyes. And you see what I mean by we're looking at the top of the head of character 2.5, the mean ant. I really like that name. I might actually use that. That's why the eyes are facing the left side, because that's where the pupil is going to be, or the right side, depending on how you see this. I guess this is the right eye. I'm tilting it just towards us because that's how eyes are normally faced, and then duplicate to the other side. We can't really mirror it because the shape is not symmetric. I know it looks a little bit weird and odd right now. You're probably thinking, how the heck is this gonna turn out good towards the end? It actually looks pretty good for the final 3D model. You can skip the video and get to that point if you want to, but I would definitely watch the entire process to see all the hiccups and all the things in the workflow that you might have missed. That's entirely up to you. If you have the time to do so, definitely do it. If you don't, skim through, whatever works for you. I drop some nuggets throughout every video by talking and narrating. Sometimes I go off on a tangent, and some of the tangents are actually some of my life stories, or just things that I've worked on, or just some things to motivate you guys to continue making your own characters. There's a lot of things that I talk about throughout my thought process. But if you guys want more tutorial videos, maybe I'll see if I can create one tutorial video on top of my thought process videos. Since we still need the antenna, I grab these two faces at the top and extrude that out to create this very long shape that resembles the antenna. But I undo that and then create an inset so we can create a smaller face within those faces. That way we don't have big antennas. We actually have small antennas for the mean ants. That makes a bit more sense for this character. The antenna looks like some chopsticks. It's actually a pretty good idea. Maybe I should actually fill it in later on in a chopstick bamboo texture style or something, because I definitely don't do it. Why did I remove that? I don't know why I removed that. I thought that's how I did the antenna. I moved the eyes and the head to a new collection, character 2.5, rename it. Now I'm actually rotating the head because I mentioned we were looking at the top part of character 2.5. Now this is how it actually should look in the 3D space. Since my sketch is just one perspective, if you're creating a 3D model, you have to visualize how that character is going to look in the 3D space. So I was blocking out the top part of the mean ant's head. That's why I'm rotating it now, so that we're actually looking at the front of his face now. And that brings his eyes to the top, which makes sense if you can visualize that. Definitely you can see a little lopsidedness to his head, but that's okay. That makes it more unique to the character. And now we can create the intent by selecting those faces, making an inset. This creates a smaller face within our original face. And then I extrude out to pull out the antenna. The length depends on how you want it. I selected that top face and just moved it to the side so that we get some sort of slant. You can make this curved if you want by doing multiple loop cuts and then just grabbing those edge loops if that's something you want to do. That way the antenna is not super straight. You can definitely leave it straight and then rig it later with some bones, and then the bones are actually going to be curved. And you can just have the antennas animate. I don't think I animated the antennas though. I just left it like that. Because during that time, trust me, I was very new to Blender still. Like, look at my lopsided ant head. Now we're going to create the humanoid body, which is new, and I'll continue in the next video. Alright, we just finished character 2.5, the mean ant's head. Now we need to create the humanoid body. This is definitely something new, so I want to at least explain this thoroughly as best as I can. Also, so that I have some sort of reference to refer to if I need to create the humanoid body. The first thing I did was add a plane, and then in edit mode, we want to merge all those vertices on the plane. Make sure to select all the vertices and press M to merge, and then click collapse. You might not have noticed it, but all the vertices are now right in the center where the cursor is. And then you would add a mirror modifier, a subdivision surface modifier, and a skin modifier. The skin modifier should actually be above the subdivision modifier. That way you can see the circular shape on the screen. You can always increase the viewport to get more subdivisions and it creates a more rounded circular shape, sort of like a sphere. We're going to use this to create our body for character 2.5, the mean ant. What we need to do is scale it down into a little sphere, drag it into place right under the head. Now we're going to extrude to the right side. What it's going to do is mirror our extrusion also to the left side. So that's why you're seeing a long version of the 3D model. This is like the arms, if you can visualize it. Or to see the vertices, you need to be in X-ray mode. You can see we have that one vertice right in the middle. When I extrude to the right, you can see it created another vertice to the right side. This is how we're going to create the body. Now I extrude that second vertice down. It's actually not the arms, it's actually the legs. To bring it a little bit closer, I select the two vertices on the right side by selecting all and dragging it closer so that we don't have wide legs. More reasonable shaped legs for character 2.5, the mean ant. Since we need to create the body too, I need to move the head up out of the way. We don't really need the reference anymore, so I hit that so that we can focus on creating the body. I'm selecting these two vertices at the top to bring down the hip area so that we can give the mean ant some shorter legs and not so far apart. With the vertice in the middle, we can extrude that up. Again, extrude for me is D because I changed it in my key map. Extrude for you guys, if you're using the Blender original key map, it's going to be E. I grab that middle vertice and drag it up. In the Z axis, make sure to press Z on the keyboard. That's how it keeps the shape clipped together in the middle. Otherwise, it's going to look separated and we don't want that. Because of the mirroring, the body should actually be one part. Every time you extrude, you get another vertex. So extruding another one here, this would be the neck, if you can visualize that. Selecting the vertice under it to create the arms. Normally I'll extrude out up until a specific body part. So this would be the shoulder. And then I extrude another vertex to create the forearm. You might be thinking, this is some skinny body for character 2.5, the mean ant. But we're going to actually scale it up in a little bit because there's a way to do it. We just have to create the stick figure body first before anything, just to get the foundation down. That's what's important. Just think of it as you're drawing a stick figure. How would the body look like? You make sure to have your vertices in the right places in case you want to adjust the size of that area, you can just select that vertex and then increase the size with no issues. That's what I'm doing here with the body in the middle. Select the vertex, press Ctrl A, and you're able to scale the body in any of the X, Y, or Z axis. You can do so specifically by pressing X, Y, and Z, or if you want to scale in all the axes, then you wouldn't press anything. You just press Ctrl A and just scale with your mouse. Normally, you need to mark the root, which is going to be where the groin area is. Select that vertex and mark the root right there. I think this is how Blender knows this is the groin area. I didn't really look into much for the mark root just yet. I should actually go read up on it, but I've just been following specific videos and they normally mark the root in the groin area. So that's why I selected that vertex. If you select the vertex and just drag it to a specific area that you like, you can see what kind of body shape you can get. If you like that, you can just keep the vertex there. Like if you want a more slimmer top and a bigger bottom and a bigger stomach, then I would have just left this vertex down here. But if I want all that weight to be evenly distributed, I would just leave the vertices back in the middle. You can do this for any of the vertices, and I'm grabbing this vertex where the thigh area is and seeing how I would want the legs. Maybe I want it to be a little further out or a little bit closer, or I want the legs to be super long or super skinny or super short. It really depends on how you want this character to look like. There is no reference for this. I am just going with the flow on what the body would look like for character 2.5, the mean ant. This is just all experimental. All I know is we're going to be making a humanoid body, so we're going to be able to animate it later on in something like Mixamo. So that process is going to be a little bit different, but the only way to use Mixamo is if we have a character that has a body like this. That's a new method for doing animations. That's more simpler, but also you have the ease of creating complex animations because they're all presets. So definitely check that out later on in the video. You can also skip to that part if that's more interesting to you. Character 2.5, the mean ant, becomes the first character that I created with a body type like this. So that's exciting for the content today. I get to talk about something new. We get to learn something different in tutorial form. This is just an additional alternative to creating characters. If you want to animate it differently than how I've been originally animating it, be sure to stick around and not miss this portion. This will allow you to create some cool characters. So now I'm turning to the side of the body just to see what I'm working with. Do I really want the body type to be like this? Looks a little chubby. The legs, we're definitely missing some feet when I look at it. So I select the vertex towards the floor and then go to the side so that I can extrude in the y-axis. This way it gives him some sort of foot. This is going to be a simple body type. You can create some complex ones if you want, if you use a lot of extrusions. But remember the KISS method, keep it simple, stupid. That's going to allow you to just focus on the basics and fundamentals, which is what I do, just to get familiar with this process. Since this is the first time you guys are seeing me do this, it's definitely good to practice if you're unfamiliar with this process. This is the first time I'm explaining it, so hopefully I'm not butchering it too much. But I'm trying my best to thoroughly explain it so that I can have a reference for when I first started doing this, and also to see my improvements on my future characters and see what are some things I would have done differently this time around, since I'm definitely better at this process than I was before. I select the middle vertex and press Ctrl A because I want the body type to be a little bit smaller. I don't want really a chubby character, unless that's what you're going for. You can see I actually press Z here. You usually see that with the highlighted blue in the middle. It doesn't show in the shortcuts for some reason. That's usually what's happening when I'm scaling in the Z-axis, and it doesn't really do anything on our body type. Now I press Y to scale in the Y-axis, and you can see the stomach is increasing and decreasing in the Y-axis. We can actually make them more chubbier in the Y-axis. I like to experiment with each axis to see what I'm working with. So I scale in the X-axis now, and that brings in the stomach from the sides. You can see you have full control of what you want to do for the body of your character. The leg looks a little bit off, leaving it like this for the thighs. So I drag it in to get the legs much more closer. It looks like he's wearing a jumpsuit right now, if you can visualize that. That's the cool thing about this method is it creates the rounded 3D shape for your body. We don't need to pull out the edges like we had to do for the plane method for the head. That's why this method is actually super useful. It actually cuts down time because we can actually create the body super quick for simple body types. I'm dragging the feet a little bit closer so it looks like we're actually straightened out. You can see the body's coming along just nicely. If you want a more bigger chest, you would select that middle vertex and scale with Control A. That will give us a more fuller shape for the chest. And then this next area I just dragged up in the Z-axis. That way we can place the head directly over that area with no issues. This is already starting to look like a cool body type for character 2.5, the mean ant. Let me know what you think of this character. His head's a little bit lopsided because of the 3D shape, but that's okay. That's the uniqueness about this character. I would love to go back in and remodel the head at some point if I do choose to go back to this character to work on. But I'm really focused on all my new characters. I really want to see how far I get in all my character sets that I sketched out so that I can have a wide variety of ideas to choose from. That's the end goal. Hopefully I get there, but I have time to create all of these characters, I believe. That's the cool part of the creative process. There's really no right or wrong. There's just characters I created, and I just need to complete the characters and then create a full game out of one of them, or 2, or 3, or 4. It all depends. It looks like I'm trying to fix the head because when I do this, it looks like I'm trying to select half of the head so that I can mirror to the other side. You can see there's an issue with this because of the way my vertices are. They're not aligned. They're crooked. So I can't really select all the vertices where they would be symmetric on both sides. I would have to be creative on how I would cut this in the middle so that I can actually mirror half of the other side and try to get some symmetric head going on. I'm selecting individual vertices to see what I can cut in half. I don't remember mirroring the other side, I don't think. I thought I kept the head the way it is because this was a while ago when I recorded this video, so definitely don't remember exactly what I did. I just remember that I finished this character and the head looked similar to how I kept it originally, but we'll just see what I came up with. This is going to be experimental sometimes where you have to decide what to do with your character. You really can't mess up. You can always undo if there's something you don't like. That's the beauty of technology, being able to undo a lot of the stuff that you worked on. It's always good to have a backup of anything that you want to make changes on, because then you don't have to worry about it. It doesn't look like I'm going to mirror the head, because it definitely wouldn't come out right if I cut it in half anyways. So I just ended up selecting the body, moving it to the character 2.5 collection. That will keep everything organized. I always do this where I press 1 on the keyboard and everything kind of just disappears. So don't be stressed out when this happens. If you accidentally press 1 on the keyboard and it looks like all your stuff got deleted or removed, it just means everything was hidden. I do this quite a lot actually. Before I used to be stressed out about, oh, what happened to all my stuff, and I didn't know what was going on, but now I know that it's just being hidden. You just have to click the eye button again to unhide, and there's your model. It looks like I'm trying to align these vertices to get a better head shape, something that's more symmetric. That's what happens with me. I see certain things that kind of bother me, but I know I shouldn't spend too much time on trying to fix it because we're just trying to finish the character. But at the same time, the other part of my brain goes, this would be pretty good content if you actually do end up fixing it. You can actually explain that, and that's different than what you would normally explain from your usual videos. That's why I end up actually just fixing things sometimes, because I'm already thinking about the thought. So I might as well just engage for a little bit. But then if it doesn't work, then I'll just continue on with whatever I was trying to do to finish the character for the day. I almost have to fight myself on certain things because there's really no set in stone plan for any of these characters. It's whatever happens that day. It's whatever I'm going to do to the character. Sometimes I'm going to be fixing them and revising them. Sometimes I'm just going to be plowing through and trying to get the character finished. It all depends on how much time you want to spend on your character. You can spend as much time as you want. You can can spend a whole day, you can spend a whole week, you can spend a whole month on your character, but is that really going to help you progress in whatever you're trying to do in the long run? Like for me, I'm trying to create as much characters as possible, and spending like a whole week or a whole day or a whole month on a character isn't going to accomplish that goal for me. So that's why I try to skip through things as quick as possible, but also learn as much as possible for that one character so that we can actually bring that skill set to the next character and learn something else. It'll just keep compounding over and over per character. We can always go back to revise the character if we need to. That's what goes on in my brain when I'm doing all of this. I'm trying my best to stay on track. Back to revising the body for character 2.5, the mean ant. The legs were a little bit too short, so I selected these two vertices near the groin area where we marked the root. Just dragged it up, and you see we have some nice long legs, and then just grab the vertex near the stomach to bring it up, just to see what we're working with. It actually looks pretty good at the bottom with a chubby body like that. This is super important for animating in Mixamo later, because in Mixamo, you're gonna have to place markers for specific parts of the body, like the wrist, the arm, the groin, the leg. You're gonna place those markers. If your body type has long limbs and long legs, Mixamo can actually rig the body so much better with the body type model like this. I'll be able to better explain that later on in the video, but I just wanted to get that thought out. That's why I opted for longer limbs and legs to better help the rigging process later on with Mixamo. I'm bringing down the head and just aligning it into place. You can see this is already looking like a pretty cool character. It doesn't have to be complex. Creating something simple still comes out super unique for your character. It can be super rough. It doesn't have to be super perfect as well. This is what I like seeing. I like seeing people's prototypes and beginning stages, just so that it shows that we all start from zero, and it takes a lot of the pressure off for working with Blender. A lot of people that work with Blender, it looks like they have years and years of experience with the stuff that they create. It's pretty awesome and amazing. Like, I want to know how much time they actually put into Blender to get to that point. I still feel like I'm a beginner at this, and I'm not really trying to go too deep into Blender like that. I just want to create some simple stuff right now, just to get the idea across. Quite possibly, if I do find myself needing to challenge myself a little bit more, then I would go into more depth with Blender. So far, all the things that I've learned have helped me create all my characters as simple as possible. I haven't had any issues with a bunch of my characters from my references. As long as I can create them and they look exactly like my reference and I can actually use them, then that's all that really matters to me. So I haven't really found myself getting stuck just yet, which is good. But at some point, I'll probably need to challenge myself a little bit more for more of the complex characters in the new character sets. But that's the exciting part. You get to figure out something new, and then I also get to narrate and explain it. I'm just aligning the eyes as so, because everything wasn't aligned for this character. I just kind of throw all the thoughts and ideas that I have in Blender, even if they're all misaligned and misshaped. But then I just go in and revise it, because I know I can always fix it. This is pretty awesome so far. If you remember the reference, it was pretty much just the top view of the character's head. That was the inspiration for my sketch. And now we have a full 3D model of character 2.5, and it looks entirely different than what I imagined. Even though the head is a little bit lopsided like this, we can always go in and shade smooth, and look, you can't even tell it's lopsided. I mean, you can tell that it's not perfect, but this character's one of one. That's what makes character 2.5 unique and special. The mean ant is special. That's why he has a lopsided head like this. I decided to shade flat. We're pretty much done with blocking out character 2.5, and brings us into UV unwrap. Unwrapping the UVs for the head should be a little bit complex. I don't know if I went with the simple way where I just marked the seam down the middle. That's what I normally do, but that might not work for this character. Well, we'll just see. I selected the edge loop in the middle, and you can see that highlighted in orange. Mark those seams, making sure to look around the shape so that I can see that all the edges were selected. For the eye, same thing. Select that middle edge loop. Mark the seam on the left side as well. It's much easier to do one eye, mark the seam, and unwrap that first, and then duplicate to the other side. That way you don't have to do the work twice, because if I do it here where both sides are marked, I still have to organize the UVs for both of them. That's extra work that you don't need to do, and that's you spending more time that could be better spent elsewhere in this process. For the body, this is the tricky part because you have to mark the seams correctly. Before I do anything, duplicate your collection for character 2.5. This way you have a backup. We're going to be making a lot of changes to all the separate objects. Backup here I'm creating is a mirrored version of character 2.5. That's how I kind of label everything. But I think a better backup would be after you've marked all the seams and organized your UVs. That way you have a backup of the work done after the UV unwrapping part, which is a pretty tedious process. But I just create backups as I go, as I need. That's just up to you how you want to do that. For the body, before we can actually mark the seams, we need to apply all the modifiers. So I'm clicking this button at the top with the check mark. This one applies all the modifiers at once versus the button at the bottom, which only applies the skin modifier since that's the one that's selected. But we want to apply all the modifiers. That way we see our new body type with all these vertices, edges, and faces. And now you have to figure out where should I mark the seams for unwrapping the body of character 2.5. There's a lot of edges that you don't need. So you definitely have to revise the edges before you unwrap, just because some of them are unnecessary. Like all these edge loops for the arm isn't really needed for my character because that's just making it more detailed. These are the edge loops that I selected that I'm going to be dissolving. You see, that doesn't really make a difference for the shape other than it being more rounded before. My character is pretty much a little poly anyways, so getting rid of these extra edges is going to be super helpful. I think all the edge loops really help the joints for animation. At least that's what I've come across. That's why I left more of the edges towards the elbow, because that's where the joint is going to be, where the bend is going to happen for animation. That's what I think about when I'm revising these edges, just leaving all the edge loops near the joints that Mixamo is going to rig. That's going to help the animation later on. I think that's how it works. I need to look more into it, but I haven't found the time to do so. I'm just going with the flow a lot of the time, and everything seems to work. Why try to fix it when it's not broken? I just learn whatever I need to know and then just use that knowledge. If it works, it works. That's just how it goes. I haven't had any issues so far, so that's a good thing. Since I adjusted those edges on the right side, it doesn't apply to the left side. Smart thing to do would be to get rid of half the character so I can mirror to the other side. So that way, if I'm making changes on the right side, it would apply to both sides. But I didn't do that here. Maybe I do later on. But I select the edge loop in the middle of the character so we can mark that seam. You should definitely be in UV editing before you mark your seams and using the UV sync selection so you can see what's happening with the UVs while you're marking the seams. Just make sure live unwrap is on. We need to create a new texture for character 2.5. I'm excited for explaining this character. This is new content, that's why, for me to explain. And I haven't really explained this part before. I've had issues creating the body. Well, I struggled creating the body before because I didn't really have a reference to any of my old characters to look at. So I didn't really have anything to refer to. But now that I'm able to explain this, I can always look back at this video. So that's what I really like about all these characters. They all kind of teach something that I've learned in Blender and also in BuildBox. That's why I like explaining a lot of these characters. They're more than just game characters. They're actually just learning material. It's somewhat educational, but I guess somewhat therapeutic as well, because I'm just creating for fun. These are just characters from my figment of imagination, and that's the fun part about it. You won't be able to see this anywhere else other than my own channel. That's the cool thing about it. Being able to create one-of-one characters that are pretty random and pretty out there, but it's all out of imagination. And then the process behind it being applied on top really helps tell the story about each character. If I do expand on this character, the backstory is just so much more powerful on how I created the character. That's what I really like about it. I really like the backstory behind different characters. Like, I would really like to know how a lot of characters that we see today were created. Like, I would like to see those videos, but all those characters existed in a time when there was no video or no recordings. So it's all just based on what the original designer explains. Now I can have everything recorded and explain everything. So then in a few years, you can actually look back and see how these characters were created and compare and contrast my newer characters and see the storyline and the evolution behind that. You can see when we marked the seam for the body in the middle, it looks exactly like how we cut it. It's like a star shaped body with the arms out like that. I rotate it to the side. This is going to take a lot of texture space if I keep it like this. You can see how this is inefficient for the UVs. Try not to die. Gotta make sure I drink water. I always forget when I'm narrating these videos. I just get into a flow and then realize, oh, I didn't drink water for like a few hours. All right. But yeah, you can see how this is going to be inefficient for the texture if we kept it this way. This is why marking your seams in specific areas of your character is important so that you can save as much space as possible. This is the simplest way you can do it if you wanted to just cut it in half. You have the front part of the body on one UV and then the back part of the body on another UV. You can certainly keep it this way. That's entirely up to you. You can actually stack the two if you wanted to on top of each other, and that would save up space. You definitely want to go in and cut your UVs into pieces as much as you can. That way it just saves space and you can start practicing on that. It gets a little bit tedious because you can pretty much mark any seam. You definitely get better at it with practice. I do get better at it with my current characters that I'm working on. Don't be afraid to practice with a few hours on this process. I can definitely tell you, you'll get better at it. You'll be able to see that with my upcoming videos. I mark a lot of seams in my characters later on. I'm more familiar with the process and I can visualize it more because I want, let's just say, the arms separate, the body separate, the legs separate, the feet separate, stuff like that. That helps with texture paint as well. When you have separate UVs, you know which area is which, so that you can color in different body parts. Or if you want to color in like different clothes for your character, that's going to be helpful if you cut your UVs a specific way as well. I'm marking this edge loop around the arms. This is going to help us cut out the arms around that edge loop. Make sure to turn on UV sync selection. I don't have it on right now. That's why you don't see anything on the left side. If you have it on, you'll be able to see what happens instantaneously after you marked the seams, but it's not happening here because it's off. I'm selecting the edge loop around the bottom area where the legs are. I select all the faces and click unwrap. You can already see all the UVs shown on the left side when I selected everything. If you were in UV sync selection, this would have already shown without having to manually unwrap by pressing U. That's how the UVs look like now with the separated body and the limbs. You can kind of visualize that on how Blender separated them. You can see this takes up a lot of room, but we can actually stack them on top of each other. For the duplicate UVs like I'm doing here, this definitely saves space in our texture file. We're not going to really be doing any detailed art on top of it. Stacking them would be okay because we're just going to have a solid color for these different areas of the body. Some of them you'll need to rotate to get the shape to be the same so that you can stack them on top of each other. This is why this is important to separate parts of your body into different UVs. This is way more efficient than the original UVs earlier, where the UVs were similar to how it looked on the right side in that star shaped. Now with these stacked UVs, we pretty much saved a lot of space in the texture. That's the importance of UV unwrapping. This is a simple character too. You can already tell the UVs got a little complex. We increased the number of UVs. This is just for the body right now. We still have the UVs for the eyes that we need to do, and also the UVs for the head. That's something to think about if you have different parts to your character. It's definitely good practice to start with simple characters and understand this process, and then you can get into more complex character because you'll already be familiar with this process. Sometimes when you're stacking UVs, not all of them are going to be identical. So you have to make the decision on whether you're going to continue to stack them or have it in a different location on the texture. Like if that UV is going to share a single solid color or whatever texture is available in that location, then you would stack them and that would be fine even if the UVs weren't identical. But if the UVs were going to use a different color or a different texture for both UVs, then you would have them separate. You have to determine this before anything. You can always adjust it as you go, But just remember to think about that as you're aligning everything. Like the arms are fine to stack on top of each other because they're obviously going to be one color and we don't have to worry about that. The legs, if you have like pants or something, or even just a solid color, the legs are going to be fine to stack on top of each other. But for the shirt in the middle, maybe you want some sort of graphic on the front. So then you would have two different UVs because maybe you don't want the graphic on the back side of the shirt. Those are some examples for how I would have my UVs. If that's something that's going to be helpful to you, I can always explain that in another video. If this is all confusing, trust me, I was in your position before where all this stuff was confusing. So don't be too stressed out or worried about it if you're just starting in Blender. I was the same. I started from zero as well. And I learned all this stuff as I go. This definitely showcases that you can learn pretty much anything if you just spend the time to do so. The more time you spend, of course, you're going to be a little bit more advanced. If you're a fast learner like I am, then you'll pick up things super quick and not have to worry about too much. But I definitely put in a good amount of time to get to this point. I'm at least trying my best to explain it. And I was also not good at that either. Either way, I feel like I've made pretty good progress and I'm excited to see what else I learn in Blender and in BuildBox. They're both two different things to learn. Both have its own learning curve. It just all depends on how much time you want to put into this. I'm trying my best to create mobile games being a one-man show. That's just what I want to do right now. Just to see what cool things I can make without needing to ask like a designer or a programmer. That's just where I'm at because I have the time to do so now. Of course, if I do need help, I will ask someone, but so far, everything's been a-okay. I just like to figure things out for myself and see what I can learn and try to add as much things as possible to my skill set. This actually helps my muscle memory and my creativity because I'm practicing daily, and that's super important. I think it's going to be super beneficial for me to know all this stuff. This is just a cool creative outlet for me to create things. That's what matters to me right now. Why am I fixing this UV? I think I'm trying to get it as perfect as possible, but like I mentioned before, it doesn't have to be perfect. If it's just going to be a solid color doesn't really matter. I could definitely cut these UVs much more efficient as well now that I look at it. During that time, I probably didn't want to do too much at once. Just separate the limbs from the body, and that's what the focus was going to be. Organizing UVs is still tricky. In my current characters, I have a bunch of UVs and my brain just goes towards how do I organize this as quick as possible without having to worry too much, because then you end up spending too much time trying to fit this in the texture space, and that time is actually not needed as well. You really have to manage yourself on the amount of time you're spending. I do so on the fly all the time. I have to check myself. I should actually have a timer somewhere on the screen to show how much time I actually spent on this process, because I actually only see that when I finish recording. That's the only time I'm able to tell, oh, I spent 2 hours on this. But maybe I'll have the timer somewhere displayed on a second screen if I need to know how long I'm working on certain things. This is how I decided to align the UVs for the body. I scaled it down just enough to save space. I'm still trying to figure out what's the best solution. I mean, I haven't really looked into it, but you can pretty much just scale anything down to a pea size of your texture, and then you don't have to worry about saving space because everything is just very tiny and taking a location of a specific color, and that just makes your life easier. I try to just organize it as best as I can. That's how I decided to do it for the body. Now moving on to the head, I have to keep these two UVs separate because I think the reference, there's some dots for his nose. That would be the top part of the character. That's why one of the UVs has to be for when we draw on it, so I can't stack them. I didn't cut out the antenna just yet, which is what I'm doing here. I marked that square at the bottom of the antenna. You can see on the left side, that's how our shape got cut out. That's why we have that hole in that large UV on the bottom. When you undo, the UVs go back to the original position. So that's what happens when you have UV sync selection on. You can actually see everything that you're cutting, and that helps you understand this process a little bit better because you can experiment with different edges that you marked and seeing what happens. But be mindful of the time you spend so you don't spend too much. You can definitely get lost in a lot of these different processes of the workflow. There's so much to do, but you have to keep yourself on track. remember, we're trying to finish the character. I decided to mark these squares at the bottom of the antenna and also the top of the antenna to see what happens. I need to mark this long edge to roll out the antenna. I guess the antenna was a little bit tricky for me because I didn't really know how to cut it. I mean, it looks simple to do right now. If you just mark the seam like that, and then your UVs will just unravel. Some of these look unaligned because of the way we adjusted it earlier on. I think during this time, I didn't really know how to make them more square because I didn't look into that process just yet. But there's an option on the right side to click rectify, and it'll just make sure the shape is in a rectangle. That way there's not crooked edges like that on my UVs. I'm experimenting here with clearing some of the seams toward the top of the antenna, which gives us this kind of cone shape. That way we can stack them on top of each other because I think they were a similar size. And I'm rotating the rest of the head to better align the UVs for the head. The antenna UVs are not the same, so I just kept them side by side to each other. I could stack them on top of each other, but I decided to keep them separate and just scaled these down. That way we can just make progress in this process. And then the eyes, same thing. I have to rotate them on the UVs so that they're aligned to how they are on the right side of the 3D model. In any case that I draw on top of the UV, it would at least come out the same. I mentioned this before. I should definitely have a FBX of eyes that already have been UV unwrapped and aligned. That way I don't have to keep redoing the eyes again. I've done it for all the characters actually, doing this same process, and that's inefficient for time purposes. And I say this over and over so that I actually remind myself. I'm sure you've heard it many times if you've been watching my videos. That's normally what I do. I say things over and over so that I actually ingrain it into my brain to actually do certain things, so that when I actually do that step again, I actually remember to do what I said in a previous video. Otherwise I'll forget and just go through the routine over and over, and we don't really need to do that. I'm getting sleepy, baby. Maybe I should stop here. We're almost done with UV unwrapping, and I scale the UVs for the eyes and then go into object mode, select all so that we can see all the UVs that we cut so that we can align all of them together now. You can see how this can get hectic when you have a bunch of UVs with a lot of separate objects. So I would focus on creating some simple characters first before getting to this point. As you can tell, it can get super complex as you get more familiar with the UV unwrapping process. This is how I decided to cut all my UVs in the UV unwrap portion. Now we get to texture paint everything, but I'm going to cut this here and continue another day because I'm tired. We're going to texture paint character 2.5. I'm starting to think it looks less like an ant and more like some sort of bug, so I might change the name. All right, let's get to texture painting character 2.5. We need to add our material to all these separate objects. I'm using the same material for all of them because they share the image texture. The reason it looks off right now is because it's taking the previous character's texture and applying it on top, but the UVs are placed differently than the previous character's UVs. That's why we have to switch to character 2.5 texture. Now you can see it's all black again because our texture is black on the left side. That's how we know everything is working correctly. I guess this is the fun part of the entire process because you get to decide what your character looks like in terms of grayscale or color or whatever texture or theme or anything you decide that you have on your mind. It could be pretty much anything. Before we do that, I always need to check the face orientation because the normals for the head is probably flipped because it was a plane originally. When we pull it out, it's usually red. So that's why we always have to flip the normals so that everything is blue. Everything else is blue because they were pretty much presets by Blender. At least that's how I interpret it. Now that we have everything flipped, I can get to texture painting. For me, it's always going to be simple. I choose the lighter gray color for the head, and then I select the body and also give this the lighter gray color. I select the eyes and give it a white color. Select these antennas for character 2.5 and give it a black color. Back to the eyes, select these faces in the middle of the UV sphere. That way we can fill in our pupil. Whenever I do this, it doesn't completely fill due to the pixels. So we have to increase the brush on the left side and use the draw tool and just fill in a bigger pupil to get more of a circular texture for the pupil. To increase the resolution of the pupil, I select the circular edge loop around the second outer ring of the UV sphere. I scale it down. You can see that increases the resolution for the pupil, and I have to do it on both sides. Now we have some high quality eyeballs that I can probably use for a majority of my new characters. I should actually take all the eyeballs that I worked on, put them all into one Blender file or in some sort of spreadsheet so that I can remember what eyes can be reusable or not, and then I won't have to keep doing them over and over anymore. I've already practiced it a lot. We don't really need to do this process over and over again. I can just reuse the eyes, pretty much the same across multiple characters. I have a variety of different eyes and different pupils, so that's something that's going to be super useful, just as long as I remember to make that file. But I'll definitely get to it. Something I've talked about, I'm pretty sure, in the previous videos, but I haven't really gotten around to it. I've just been trying to make as many characters as possible, but whenever I find the time, I'll definitely do. We definitely want some bigger pupils because the reference is a little bit bigger. Also in the reference, the character has some eyelids. So I press C to circle select. That allows you to select many faces all at once by just holding down the left mouse button and then selecting as many faces that you want. This makes it easy to select all the faces without having to individually click into all of them, which takes some time. To deselect, you press the middle mouse button. When you finish selecting everything, you can press the right mouse button and then you'll have all your faces selected that you need. That's a pretty good tip. Once you have all the faces, you go to texture paint, select that square button at the top. It will allow you to fill in the color for only the faces you selected. I chose a gray color to give it some eyelids. This looks a little bit off because we're painting directly onto the texture, which doesn't really look good. Eyelids should be over the eyeball and not on the eyeball. So later in the video, I create the eyelids by duplicating those faces and putting it on top. But I think something else caught my attention, which was selecting these faces in the front with circle select. Scale this down so that we have a smaller nose and mouth area, and that matches the reference just a little bit more. Having it that big didn't really look like the character on the sketch. Now it definitely looks a little bit more like it. Making characters requires a lot of tweaking, especially if it's your own character, but it's the best part. It's fun to do because there's no right or wrong answer. You have to decide how you like the nose, how you like the mouth, what size head do you want, what type of body are you going to give it. Is it going to be a humanoid body? Is it going to be a bouncing body? Is it going to be an animal body? There's just various ways to think about your character. It's all part of the creative process. I don't know about you, but I enjoy a lot of the character creation stuff. The beginning part is the tricky part because not many people would like to create their own characters because of how much work it requires. But once you're finished creating the character, you can pretty much do anything with it. Put it into a game, put it into a loopable GIF file that you can play some sort of animation. You can put it into your portfolio to showcase all the cool characters. Some people might find your work fascinating and they might even hire you for a commission to create characters for them. Who knows? So there's various things you can do with your own characters. You might end up making characters for other people. It's important to practice. You gotta practice your techniques over and over so that you can get better over time. It's always good to start now and not wait. You're just going to keep telling yourself tomorrow, and it's never going to happen. If you want to create your own characters, I'd start now, get over the hard part, and eventually it'll become easy for you. It'll be pretty much like second nature, and it'll be out of muscle memory, even if the process isn't correct. If you see my videos, you'll notice that I started out using just one technique, and then eventually I started including different techniques to create the next character. But then it took me time to actually learn various techniques, and now I'm able to combine them to get a end result. I'm just getting started. I'm still learning different modifiers, still learning different ways to create shapes in Blender. There's so many add-ons that streamline the process. So I got to learn it slowly to ensure that I learn the previous methods as best as possible before moving on to the next method. Otherwise, you're going to replace your current method and you didn't even take the time to learn it to begin with. That's what I'm really cautious about when I'm creating my characters. I want to make sure I can do it with a specific method first, and I want to do it multiple times over and over. And then that actually ingrains into my memory bank. And now I can just add on to my skill set and not have to worry about forgetting the different things that I learned, because then I'll have everything on video. If I need to refer back to it, I practice it multiple times. So once I see it, I'll fully remember what I did, and then I'll move on and practice the new method over and over. So that's what I normally do. Recently, I've been using the subdivision modifier with a cube that already creates a rounded shape for us, and I just extrude to create different body parts. So that's something that I'm practicing on. It's a very different method because I can do various things with it, and it makes this process a little bit faster. But then again, if I think about it, I actually spend more time trying to create new characters. I can actually do more with this new process. That actually makes me want to experiment and try new and different things. That's why now I'm in my flow and I actually spend a little bit more time. I think I'm spending, well, at least I remember I spent like 2 hours on one of the characters. It was just blocking it out. The timing can depend on a lot of things. Back to character 2.5, we need to save our texture because we're going to start drawing on it and we don't want to lose all the progress we've already made. When you undo, Blender will delete your texture if it's not saved. So be sure to do that. So now we can draw the mouth onto the front from our selected faces. Choosing to draw on the right side now that everything works with the flip normals. I've had that issue in the past where I couldn't draw directly on the mesh because our normals were flipped. Pretty much when they were red, we weren't able to draw on them. Now we have the mouth. We also have these 2 dots for the nose, and that right dot, if I'm looking at the screen, my right, actually looks pretty good. I don't know why I didn't keep that. Looks like a X sign. I should have kept that one and then just made the left one similar to that. Had a really cool design, definitely more symmetric. It definitely looked better than these ones. But going on the left side and just placing a circular dot always seems to look better anyways. So painting on the left side is probably recommended because it's painting directly onto the texture. I always forget that because I'm just in my flow and I'm just dropping different ideas on the character. So the right side should be used for just drawing quickly onto the 3D mesh, and you can clean it up on the left side with the draw tool, or even just take it out into Procreate and do it by hand if that's easier for you, which it is for me. Or you can just leave it messy. It's your art, it's your character, you can do whatever you want. So however you want to do it, that's fine too. So I duplicate the eyes, and then with both eyes selected from this drop down menu, I click individual origins and scale it up. That allows me to scale the eyes up for both objects from their individual origins. That makes it easier for us to create the eyelids, which is what I'm doing here. We're going to cut the bottom half of the UV sphere and keep the top half, scale it just enough so that it looks like some eyelids. In UV editing, we're going to need to move these UVs to its own location so that we can fill it in with a different color. These black eyelids actually look pretty cool. Very black and white, cartoony style. We're actually going to fill it in with a darker gray. For some reason, the texture is coming out a little bit weird, most likely because the UVs are slanted. Actually, the reason it looks like that is because it's inside the eyeball. We need to scale it up just a little bit more. That way the shape is actually sitting on top of the eyeballs. Now we have a sleepy bug looking character. I'm rotating the eyelids just so we can see more of the pupil. We need to scale it out just a little bit more because it's on a different angle. This way we can have the eyelids a little bit above the pupil so he doesn't look as sleepy. But the sleepy version was actually pretty cool. That could have been a second variation of character 2.5. So that way we could have 2 different characters, a sleepy one and a more awake one. Now we have a big pupil for the eye. So these are various things you can test on your character. It's actually pretty fun seeing different variations of your character, because then you can think of different ideas on how you would want to use them, or even think about many variations, because games have different characters anyways within one game. Some of them have different costumes, which are going to be unlockables for the players. So that's the fun part of experimenting with your own characters. You can do a lot of things. Let me know what you would do with this character. Yes, I know he needs some clothes. I'm going to put some clothes onto this character later on through the texture. That way he's not super naked. I think a lot of my characters were naked anyways. I mean, I didn't really think of clothes as I was drawing these characters. I was just trying to jot down as many characters as possible. It wasn't until one of my friends said they all need some clothes. I showed her some of my sketches and she said they need some clothes. That's pretty funny. That was the time when I started putting clothes onto my characters that I drew in Procreate. So you'll see that shift happening whenever I get to those sketches. Most of them are going to be pretty naked. I'll come up with some texture ideas for various clothes. It's all part of the process. I'm not really thinking about it, but as I'm creating the characters, different things cross my mind, and then I end up putting clothes onto them. Some of them I don't, some of them I do. Just really depends on what I feel like for that day, but we'll just see what I come up with. Like I said, there's no instruction manual for any of these characters, so I'm just going with the flow of whatever I feel for the day and whatever I think about. That becomes the character at the end of the day. So whatever clothes they have, whatever ideas I decide to apply to it, is whatever is applied to that character. It was all very spontaneous based on my creative process. It's just intuition, creativity, and surprise and wonder, which makes all the videos super exciting. I don't even know what I came up with for that day because I completely forgot what I did. I haven't watched these videos in a long time, but also it's actually fun to narrate what's going on because I don't even know what I'm going to be narrating. But also it's like I did the work and now it's time to learn what I did, but then also it's time to teach what I learned. So that's the fun part. There's like multiple things happening right now. I think that's the beauty of this content that I'm working on. That's always going to be changing and I don't really know how it's going to end up. We'll just have to see how the feedback happens with the community and we'll just go from there. I'm selecting these bottom faces for the head of character 2.5. I'm filling it in with a darker color so we can give him some sort of beard. I guess it's a beard, or maybe it's just shading for a part of the bottom half of the head. You can really see how the vertices are misaligned by the way the shading looks like. That's why I did a little bit of organizing by just moving up these vertices so that we can at least get some sort of symmetric shape for the shading the head. Remember, this was the first time I've actually modeled a character from the top down view and then rotated it 90 degrees. That's why it's a little bit odd. I didn't use the mirror modifier, which I should have in the beginning, but I decided to just wing it as usual and see what we come up with. It actually turned out pretty good. It's not really issue. Now we move on to the body. I'm selecting these faces towards bottom of the body. This is going to be like the pants of character 2.5. We're actually going to give him some clothes. So I fill it in with darker gray. This kind of looks like underwear, actually. I should have just kept it like that. This character with underwear. That looks pretty funny. You see, it's pretty fun just using some grayscale colors. Just use a light gray and a dark gray and just mess around to see what ideas you can come up with. This actually sparks more ideas because you're not focused on trying to get the color right. You're just trying to focus on a particular body part and trying to think, what should I put on this character? Like for the bottom area, you can think of underwear. The top area, you can think of clothes. You're just painting on top of the character with just one darker color. And you don't have to worry about actually figuring out what color it is until later on when you actually polish it. I decided to select the rest of the legs and fill it in with the darker gray. It looks like we gave it some pants. As simple as that. The character already looks pretty cool this way. You can do a lot of things in the most simplest way and still get the idea across for any of your characters. That's the awesome part about it. I select a darker gray and fill in the bottom part of his feet to give it some shoes. Now it looks like he's wearing some charcoal boots of some sort. I filled it in with a black color just to see what it would look like in comparison. It's always good to use a slightly lighter tone of black because then you can save the black color for any highlights such as our outline, and it would actually enhance the appearance of the character. It will make our grayscale colors stand out a little bit more. That's why I practice with the grayscale colors. You're really just focusing on the character itself, not worrying too much about different color palettes. This character can be any color at any time. It will always need some sort of shading to differentiate the different textures that you put on the character. That helps differentiate the clothes or the different body parts. That's what really matters. It's just getting the idea across. You can tell just by looking at this that it's a bug character wearing some pants and some black boots. I save this texture. That's pretty much our textures for character 2.5. A bug in pants and boots. His name can actually be Bug Boots. Bug Boots can be a potential name for character 2.5. I just came up with that right now. Let me know what you think in the comments. Bug Boots. Clean. Now we can actually animate character 2.5. Bug Boots has a nice ring to it. I go to the preferences and I'm checking for an add-on called Expy kit for rigging. I'm going to do the animation different this time than our normal animation using Rigify. We're going to be using Mixamo for the first time. This process makes everything so much smoother for humanoid animations, and it's provided by Adobe. We need to export our FBX, select and give it a name, character 2.5 body.fbx, check selected objects, select mesh, leave everything else the same and just click export. Mixamo.com is provided by Adobe. They have presets, animations for you that you can use for your different characters. I log in with my email. This is the UI that you'll see. Don't remember this character on the right side. Actually, I should actually go find him. That character was probably a character that I worked on way before, when I was just getting started learning about the different processes and trying to figure out how Mixamo works. This dummy character was one of my original characters. Maybe I should go find him and actually create a game with him, because that'd be something cool. My characters now actually look much better than the dummy character, but the dummy character needed to exist in order for all this to happen. So we can't forget about Dummy Boy, because Dummy Boy had to exist and die before character 2.5 and all these new characters could exist and survive. I'm gonna need to find that character, because Dummy Boy, I should make a game with you. Let me know if you guys want to see Dummy Boy in some sort of future game. Maybe I'll bring him out. I don't even know where the file is actually, so I gotta go dig up into my hard drive and see. What you do is click upload character in Mixamo with the FBX that we exported for character 2.5. We drag it in and let it load. You can see our character shows up on the screen. And how Mixamo works is you place these markers based on the specific body parts that they mention, and this will actually auto rig your character only if it's a humanoid type character. They have a example on the right side. So place the blue marker where the chin is, place the green marker where the wrist is. It doesn't have to be perfect. You just have to place it as best as you can. Place the yellow markers for the elbows, the orange markers for the knees, and then the red marker for the groin, and then click next. This will auto rig, so you have to give it some time. Sometimes it takes a while, sometimes it doesn't. If you do it with a character that doesn't really have a humanoid body, then of course the animation is not really going to work. It's going to be all over the place. So make sure to only use Mixamo for characters that have humanoid bodies. Once it's done, you're going to see your character looking around. This is where you review to see if the rigging is correct. This looks pretty good so far. You can see we did that pretty fast in comparison to the Rigify method, where we have to place bones individually. So it really depends on what games you decide to make with your characters. You could even use this for animation within Blender. Mixamo is pretty useful at the end of the day for pretty much anything. Once it's finished, you just click next. Now you have your character on the right side. The reason why we have the arms out like that, they call it a T pose. I didn't really look at the details. All I know is it looks like a T, and it makes it easier to rig by having your arms like that versus having it to the side, which might intersect with the body. My assumption is that it's much more clearer to place your markers if the body is in a T pose. It's more straightforward. At least that's my understanding of it. I didn't really look at the definition, but you guys can Google that if that's important to you. I just mimic what other people do. And you download your FBX from Mixamo with all the rigs. This makes the process much more faster. Just change the T pose to original pose and then download that, and then take this new FBX and place it into your folder. Make sure to rename it with a extension of Mixamo so you can distinguish between the two. This is going to be super important when we bring it back into Blender. We go to File, Import FBX, select the new Mixamo FBX and import FBX. Now we have our rigged character 2.5. We click the armature and then click in front. And you can see all the bones have already been rigged for the character. We didn't have to set up the bones individually. So that's a more efficient way to do that instead of setting the bones up individually if you don't want to, only if it's a humanoid character. But then when you bring it in from Mixamo, the rotation in the X is at 90 degrees and the scale is actually at 0.01 in X, Y, and Z. So you have to make sure to apply all transforms to reset the rotation and the scale back to its original. This will get rid of any rigging issues you have from your characters brought in from Mixamo. That was something that I had trouble with in the beginning, I believe. I was trying to figure out why it wasn't working, bringing my FBX from Mixamo into Blender. That was a huge step that I need to figure out. Make sure the bones are selected and then go in pose mode and right click, and then under Expy Kit, which was the add-on that we were looking at in the preferences earlier in the video, go to conversion and click extract meta rig, change the rig type to Mixamo. And then some additional bones are going to appear. You can keep these or you can delete them. I forget exactly why, but you definitely don't need those shoulder bones. But I delete some of the hand bones as well. Back in pose mode, go back to extract meta rig. You can adjust some of the offsets for the knee, the elbow, and the fingers. And then I hid the armature to see the extracted meta rig, and it looks like I'm missing one of the legs for some reason. So I actually delete that and unhide the armature again and redo that step again, clicking the armature, going to pose mode, go to conversion, extract meta rig, change the offset knee to negative 0.03, hide the armature, and then check in front so we can see the bones on the meta rig. Some of this offset stuff, I don't think it's necessary, but I saw some videos and they do adjust the offset to some of these bones. Every time you extract the meta rig, there's always going to be additional bones. I forget if you do need these bones or not, but I delete the shoulder bones again and then also the hand bones again. I was doing that earlier, but we deleted that meta rig. Delete some of these additional bones we don't need. The reason I delete bones is because there's limitations in build block. Definitely need to delete any unnecessary bones. I select the armature and hide it, and I scroll down. You can see it already has our Rigify layer names set up for us. We also skip this process. We don't need to do the different layer names, change their row numbers, and also color code them with the bone groups. We scroll down and click regenerate rig. There was some sort of error. Now in the armature, everything seems to have disappeared, but in the meta rig, everything seemed to have transferred. Regenerate rig again, and there's an error. It says palm 0.01 left. The rig must have a parent and at least one sibling. Incorrect armature for type super palm. Most likely it's one of the bones that we deleted earlier. That's why you have to make sure to keep some of the bones. I just forgot which bones I was supposed to keep. What I did was just delete the armature along with any hierarchies that came with the file so I can start over. This is what I normally do. I test a specific framework to see if it works. If it doesn't, I have my backup, which was the Mixamo FBX file. so I can restart the process again. I actually captured everything on video, so I know what mistakes I made. Even if I forget, I can always refer back to the video, and then now this is what I'm doing, narrating what happened. So that was a mistake of mine of deleting specific bones that I shouldn't have deleted in the rigged Mixamo version of the FBX. Now we need to start from the beginning again and import the FBX back into Blender, and then check in front, and then we see the bones again. Now for this armature for character 2.5, make sure to apply all transforms. Select the armature, go into pose mode, right click, go to conversion in the Expy kit section of the add-on, click extract meta rig, select Mixamo for the rig type. You can set the offset to -0.03 and then hide the armature so that we can see the meta rig, and then check in front so we see these bones, and then go into edit mode and delete those bones near the shoulder. I think removing those is fine, and then deleting these pelvis bones is also fine. And then I kept the hand bones because most likely that was the error that we were having. I go back to pose mode, scroll down, all the layer names are here with their correct rows and their bone group values, and then I click regenerate rig. The rig was successfully generated, and now we have a complete rig of character 2.5. We really didn't need to set it up. We grabbed it from Mixamo. That's the beauty of using a more humanoid body for our character, because then we can have this process be a little bit more streamlined for us, versus doing it the previous way where we had to rig each bone separately for our character. The importance of showing two alternatives is so that if you have characters that don't have a humanoid body, you'll know how to rig it and know how to animate it in the most simplest form. That's one way to animate your characters. This is another way to animate any characters that have a humanoid body. Not all characters are going to be the same anyways. It's best to know different methods so you can do different things depending on what type of characters you make or what type of game mechanics you're planning to create. That's why I like learning various different things. I can make characters in various different ways now, and that's beneficial. So you're not only pigeon-toed into one method, you have a wide variety of ways to do it now. Now that we have the rig for character 2.5, bed boots, I hide the meta rig. You can see this is how the naming convention should have been for all my previous characters. The meta rig is actually the one for the bones, and the armature is the one for the rig. So that's how I was able to tell how the naming convention was supposed to be. That's how Mixamo kind of set it up. Now with this armature, we can go into pose mode. We can do our usual animating if we want to with this rig, where we grab specific layers and then see what type of movements it does. So this is pretty cool because this is actually a humanoid type body. So we can actually do real movements and real poses if we wanted to. Of course, if you messed up on any of the poses and want to return to the rest pose, just go to pose, clear transform, and click all and revert back to this T pose. Now that we have this rig ready for character 2.5, we can go back to Mixamo and then choose any of these presets that they have available. I click the dying animation and you can see character 2.5 bud boots, tilts his head, and then it falls forward. So I'm going to download this animation because it's pretty funny, and you can download it without the skin. I forget the difference between using skin and without. I think when you use without skin, it's just going to give you the rig for the FBX. And I click download. Now we have this dying FBX. Make sure to rename it so that we can distinguish between different animations. If your folder has a bunch of FBXs, definitely want to rename it to distinguish your animations from one another. I put character 2.5, dying, Mixamo. That's pretty straightforward, and I can remember it at any time. If I need to, I can refer to this video now that it's clearly labeled. Back into Blender, go to object mode, go to file, import FBX, import that dying Mixamo animation. You can see the rig was imported without the skin. I extend a second view for the left side and change this to the action editor so we can see the summary of this armature. When you import it into Blender, it's going to have this name, armature, Mixamo layer with some value. You're definitely going to need to rename it to something that you'll be able to understand. So I put character 2.5 dying animation. I select the first rig and shift select the dying animation rig. Go into pose mode, right click, go binding under Expy kit, click bind to active armature, and then it'll come up with these settings. Change to Rigify controls, and then bind target to Mixamo, and then check chain look at. You can see the difference between the two when you don't check it. It just looks better when you have it checked. Keep everything else the same. Now you can see the dye animation that we downloaded from Mixamo is being applied to character 2.5 within Blender. So this is super useful. We didn't really have to do the animations. We just downloaded a preset and we already have our rig set up for us. Also one of the animations that was provided from Mixamo. So that's the usefulness of using Mixamo with a humanoid character. We just streamlined this process and cut down a lot of our time. Also helped us create a more complex animation, because this is a pretty complex animation when you look at the summary in the action editor. We also need to bake the keyframe animations because they're not baked at the moment. So we select one of the rig layers and right click, go to binding under Expy kit, select constrain controls, go to hose, animation, and bake action. Actually, right click, now go to animation under Expy kit and select bake constrain actions. This process is actually confusing for me. So if I mess up on this, most likely because it wasn't working in the beginning. At the bottom, originally, I did that and it gave the select constraint control menu, which is incorrect, I think. So I clicked out of the character. It looks like I highlighted everything again, went back to animation and clicked bake constraint actions again. Now on the bottom, this is, I believe, correct, where if you got the bake constraint actions drop down menu and you click bake and exit, that means you successfully were able to bake the keyframe animations. Now, when you go to the action editor, bring down the drop down menu and then expand the different actions. The character 2.5 dye animation. You can see this one has all the keyframes in the summary. And then I double check these different actions that were within the action editor. Some of these are unnamed, so most likely I didn't need those. Back to the character 2.5 dye animation. All right, this part's actually a little bit confusing now. Probably didn't get it right this first time. This was the first time I did this, so the process is probably confusing because I'm pretty confused right now. But most likely I didn't nail it the first time, so bear with me on this video. I'm just retracing my steps right now watching this video. Looks like I didn't do it correct again. I select one of the bones on the dyeing animation armature from Mixamo, and then right click, go to animation, click bake constraint actions, and then click bake and exit. This looks correct now because the body actually did some movement. In the action editor, it actually created a third action, which is why there's action 0.004. I think this one's actually the correct dyeing animation. This is the one we need to keep. And you can see with the summary, all the bone layers that were being animated with their keyframes. This is pretty complex. If you were doing this on your own, it probably would take a very long time. So that's why Mixamo definitely streamlines this rigging process, animation process, so we don't have to do that. So definitely check out Mixamo and use it to help out with your rigging and animation for your characters. If you're using a humanoid body, what I did was go back to the character 2.5 dye animation, copied this name, went back to the action 0.004 because that's the correct animation, and pasted in our name. So now this one's the one that we should keep. I selected the FBX armature that we imported and delete that because we don't need it anymore. Our rig already has the dye animation because we just baked that animation into our character, so we don't have to worry about that. That was the correct way to import the Mixamo animations into Blender using Expy kit. That process was what I was trying to explain. I didn't get it right the first time, but I actually want to show all the mistakes that I made, because then you'll probably make the same mistakes anyways. At least you'll be able to troubleshoot it with the information that I provided. Otherwise, you're going to get confused and there's no other way to troubleshoot it unless someone also ran into that issue. Now we can see this dye animation. It's pretty cool for character 2.5 bug boots. And this is a pretty complex animation. Definitely would take a very long time doing it by yourself. This is what I've been talking about. Definitely work on simple animations first. And then whenever you get to this point where you want to create your own complex animations, you know how crazy this summary list is. And if you wanted to do one of these from the get-go, it would frustrate you so many times because you're going to need to practice to get to this point. But if you have a humanoid character, you can actually skip that and just use Mixamo. But you need to understand the process of rigging the character and also understanding what rig layers does what movements. That was the importance of me actually going through that process with my previous characters, so that you can slowly teach yourself what's going on. And then now when you get to character 2.5, if you've been watching my videos, you actually understand what's going on with the animations and the rigging process. That's how I set up my videos. At least it's in a way where I started from the beginning. It's in the most simplest way as possible. That's just how I am. I start small and very simple, and I move up slowly until I get to the more complex stuff. That's just how it should always be for everything that you do. Otherwise, if you skipped all the small stuff and all the simple stuff, you won't know what to do when you run into problems and issues because you never actually went through that process. Hopefully, all the content that I've been making up until this point has been useful to you guys, or at least provided some sort of value. At least watching all these videos from me, I'm actually learning all the things that I made mistakes on, but also the things that I've made progress on. And it's cool to actually see that in video form and be able to narrate it. So I'm excited to see all of this because now I remember all the mistakes that I made up until this point. That's the cool part about this journey, because I get to learn new things, but I also get to learn all the old things that I messed up on that I no longer mess up on. It's just cool to be able to refer back to it and have something to watch on my own progress and be able to show that to all of you guys. I'm not perfect. I started out the same. I'm human. I still make mistakes. Hopefully that helped you guys out, and let's continue learning some more about Blender and making our cool characters come alive. That's the whole beauty about this content creation journey that I'm actually going on for all of this. All right, back into Mixamo. I'm looking for another animation. There's a lot of animations. You guys can search through typing in things. You can click the tabs to see what animations you like for your character. I don't know if I add a second animation for this character. Maybe I don't. It might be in the next humanoid character. I forget which one it's going to be, but it'll be in one of the next videos for sure. Be sure to watch that whenever I get to narrating that. I think I'm finished with the animation, and we're just going to have one animation, which is that dye animation we got from Mixamo for character 2.5, bug boots. So I go to File, Export, FBX, and I export this. This time I export it as character 2_5, full Mixamo.fbx, check selected objects, select armature, mesh, change to Z forward, uncheck add leaf bones, uncheck NLA strips, and click export. And then organize our files in our folder, because now we have a whole bunch of different FBXs. Make sure to name them correctly so that you can actually distinguish between the different files. If you kept it as the original name, you can't really tell what it is. That's why I try to label it as best as I can. If I need to refer to the videos, I can tell the difference between the body Mixamo FBX versus the dying Mixamo FBX versus the full Mixamo FBX. That's how I distinguish between the different files. I don't know how you guys want to do it, but that's how I label it. I have a whole bunch of files in this folder because it has all my different characters for character set number 2. Yeah, that concludes the video for character 2.5, bug boots, for the entire Blender process. This time for character 2.5, we created a more humanoid body, and that allowed us to use Mixamo. For the first time, we were able to create a complex animation the most simplest way and the most fastest way, where we just downloaded it from Mixamo, which is provided by Adobe. They have a whole bunch of presets that are available to use for animation. We brought it to Blender and used Expy, which is an add-on. You can Google it and download it so that we can bring the animations from Mixamo into Blender. That way we have multiple uses for this animation, we can use it in BuildBox or whatever game engine you use, or you can just create animations within Blender using the animations from Mixamo. So there's multiple use cases for that, and this is how you would have done it if you've gotten to this point in my videos. So be sure to check out my previous videos if you haven't already. Up to this point, you can learn a whole lot from my mistakes, but also the progress that I made. If you're trying to create your own characters and use it in the game, this is how you would have done it if you were using Blender and BuildBox like I am. But also check out the next video where we're going to use this character in BuildBox. I think we're just going to do a simple drop-in of the animation of the FBX to showcase the animation. I don't think I came up with a mechanic for this. But anyways, just go watch the next video and we'll see what I did in BuildBox. Thanks for your time. Hope you learned a lot today. I definitely did. At least I refreshed my memory of what I did for this character and all the mistakes that I made, but also it's pretty cool to see. Let me know what you think in the comments. Please like and subscribe. Appreciate your help and peace out. Bam.